They refused to do any treatment while I was doing the radiation. That's kind of what got me started down the path of figuring out alternative treatments because they weren't helping me. When you go into chemo, the first thing they have is a fridge full of Ensure, and they tell you to take Ensure, keep on your weight. And I asked them, I said, is there anything diet-wise or nutrition-wise I can do to help my situation? And they're like, no, diet does nothing. And they walk around there with cookies and chocolate, and they hand it out to cancer patients as you're sitting there getting chemo. And it blows my mind. Biggest troubles that I'm having is my stomach is half the capacity. So I really got to take advantage of the highest nutrients-dense food available, fatty beef. And then the other thing I do is I buy pure fat from the butcher and fry it up like bacon. I cut it into like what looks like bacon, and I just eat pure animal fat.
Okay, welcome everybody. Today we have another success story. We're going to be having Jason here is joining us from, I guess you said, Ontario, Canada. So Jason, good morning. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. How about you?
I'm also doing well. I guess we'll just start from, maybe tell us a little about your background and how things started out for you, and then we'll go from there.
Sounds good. So about a year and a half ago, just before Christmas, I got sick right before Christmas. I don't know if it was COVID or a flu or what it was. And I was young, healthy. My wife owns a hair salon, which is where I'm sitting at today. I was in financial services business, running around, running my practice. Everything was good, but I never recovered from being sick. So come January, I don't know, like I had no energy. And every time I'd walk upstairs or do anything, I would just completely crash. Like I had absolutely zero energy. And so I went to the doctors at the walk-in clinic, and they looked me over and they said I had a bacterial infection. So I went on antibiotics till, 10 days or whatever it was. And middle of January, end of January, I wasn't getting any better. So I wasn't really sure why, but I was busy on the go. I just kept powering through. And then about 25th, 26th of January, there was a lump that popped out on the one side of my neck. And so I wasn't sure what was wrong. So I went back to the walk-in clinic. And the doctor said, go to the hospital right away, because if it was a bacterial infection, it'd be on both sides. So the next day I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer that had metastasized through my whole body. It was in my spine, most of my lymph nodes from my basically pelvic bone to my neck. It was all over my liver, 3 to 5 centimeter tumors all over my liver. It was on my pancreas. There was a couple spots in my lung, and the main location that it had started from was in my esophagus. There was a 6 centimeter tumor in my esophagus, and I had no symptoms from it. I had no idea. So that's kind of what started the whole thing. They told me a couple weeks later, into February now, that they were going to do internal radiation and stretch my esophagus, and they gave me my prognosis, which was basically 3 months to live and possibly 12 months with treatment if I was lucky. And
well, how long ago was that? That was
January 26th, 2023.
Okay, so we're obviously past 12 months now, so you're closer to like 15, 16 months out. So it has to feel somewhat good. Now, again, what was the type of cancer you had?
Esophageal cancer.
Esophageal cancer. Okay. All right. And so, what were the treatments that you've had up to this point with regard to that?
So at the time, I guess that's in February, they did internal radiation. They did 3 rounds of internal radiation, which is a lot because it's internal. They go down your esophagus and they radiate directly onto the tumor. And then I started chemo in March, and basically from March until November of this past year, I had 17 rounds of chemo, and I ended up with 6 rounds of internal radiation. They said if they did any more radiation, my esophagus would turn to mush. And 17 rounds of chemo. The doctor said all the case studies and everything, the most anybody did was 10 to 12 rounds of chemo. So I've had a lot of treatment.
Okay. And so where you are. So I guess there's a nutritional component to this. I assume, otherwise you wouldn't be here. But how does that play into this? I mean, where did you? How did you start doing like a carnivore diet, or what happened with you?
Well, so I guess since we're in February, we can go through March. I started my chemo, and that kind of everything went well. Like I started getting better every day. Through February, I spent 2 weeks in the hospital, and they ended up putting me on a pain pump. I went downhill extremely quickly. I couldn't lay flat, retained all kinds of fluid. Um, and as I was retaining all this fluid, I was just in the worst pain of my life. It was crazy. I went from being great to barely able to get out of bed, couldn't lay flat. It was horrible. But as soon as March came around, I started chemo and everything started to get good again. By May, I took myself off the pain pump. They wanted to keep me on the pain drugs. But at the time, I still had trust in my doctor. I trusted the standard of care. I was going into chemo. They were giving us insures. I was taking all this stuff that I now know is not good for you. But everything was going great. So why would I kind of do anything different? Come the summertime, though, my second scan, which was about 6 months out, so it would have been end of July, I had started choking on food and throwing up. And I didn't know what was going on. But that scan showed a mixed result. So essentially what happened was the chemo now 6 months out had worked everywhere through my body except for my esophagus. So everything had shrunk everywhere except for my esophagus. It grew to 6.5 centimeters now. And so it was really an awkward time. And I had to go back and redo radiation. And that's how I got to 6 rounds of radiation. I did 3 more rounds at that time of internal radiation. They told me they can't do any more no matter what. Basically, I was done. And there was no chance at surgery. I was stage 4. They're not going to do anything for me. My weight was down, dropping. I was 160 pounds. Right now I'm actually at 135, which is significant improvement. But I got all the way down to 120 pounds, which was a complete mess. And so they refused to do any treatment while I was doing the radiation for the month of August and most of September. And that's kind of what got me started down the path of figuring out alternative treatments because they weren't helping me. The doctor had explained to me at that time that when they use standard of care, chemo and radiation, the curve kind of looks like this, if you will. So basically they get tremendous results right out the gate most of the time, 3 to 6 months, and then they don't, that's your first line treatment. It doesn't really work anymore. So then they put you on second line treatment. That's the next step. And then that doesn't work anymore. They're lucky to maintain the cancer at that point in time, the second line treatment. By the time you get to third line treatment, they essentially said at stage 4, you're toast. So that was what I was told. So I got on the internet, started researching. Now, have you ever heard of Professor Seyfried?
Yeah. I've interviewed Thomas a few times. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Yeah. So, and I'm pretty sure I watched your interviews in September. So that's when I started on. I wasn't eating anything. I was choking. I had done the radiation. The only thing at the time I could eat and keep down, I'd say middle of September till end of October, was a ribeye steak and eggs. So I just ate that. I knew that it was good for me. I was listening to everything I could from Professor Seyfried. I was listening to all the carnivore guys. I was listening to Homestead How. I was listening to you. I was listening to everybody. And I just absorbed everything I could because I wasn't going to sit there. Right now my son's 2 years old and my daughter's 5 years old. So the time they were 1 and 4, I got an amazing wife. I wasn't ready to leave. So I had to do something. They're not giving me treatment. It felt like the world was coming crashing down on me. And so I basically did carnivore right up till November. It was middle of September to end of October, somewhere in that ballpark. Mentally, with these mixed results too, I guess that's important to know. In Canada, you can actually do psilocybin psychotherapy, and that had a drastic impact on me. So it's basically magic mushrooms with a doctor and a psychiatrist. So I was able to apply to Health Canada and do that, and that helped with my stress and my focus. And I was so stressed and I just felt like the world was crashing down on me. And my glucose at the time, I didn't have a way of testing it, but I'm sure it was through the roof. And getting that all under control made a big difference, plus that carnivore diet. But I actually gave up on it end of October. Listening to Professor Seyfried talk, listening to reading all of the research, he talks about the glutamine pathway. So you got the glucose, which is great. I had that under control, but he talked about, the field source of glutamine, and I didn't understand it at the time. I now know that's the building blocks. I actually interviewed Professor Seafried on my channel a week and a little bit ago. It was an amazing interview. The guy's brilliant, and I didn't understand it at the time, but I just gave up. Like, I went, oh, I can't block this glutamine. Like, what's the point? So I actually gave up for about a month and a half until about Christmas. I started eating badly. And then I was at my mother-in-law's house on Boxing Day, and I was eating a cucumber and I choked on it. I ended up rupturing the tumor in my esophagus, the 6.5 centimeter tumor, and bleeding out of my mouth. I would lost over a liter of blood just in a 10-minute drive with my wife going straight to the hospital. It was a pretty scary time at that time. So they went in and they sprayed hemp spray, hemo spray on it, something to that effect, something they use in the war to coagulate bleeding. They said it would give me temporary relief. And so they had done that, and I couldn't do treatment again. So I had done a couple rounds of chemo through November when I had given up on the carnivore diet. They had given me some more rounds of my chemo, but then I started having allergic reactions by December. Then I was hemorrhaging, and here I am now, the first week of January. I said to my wife, I got to go back to doing something. I can't just do nothing. So they did more radiation on me at that time. It wasn't internal. It was one shot of external radiation just to constrict the blood vessels in the tumor that had ruptured after they got the bleeding stopped. And so I went to a ketogenic diet, actually. It was really carnivore based, but I was having such a hard time eating. I couldn't just rely on meat because I would choke and throw it up. And that's when I actually got down to my lowest weight of 120 pounds. So I was honestly eating anything I could get in. That was either vegetables or meat. And it was always high fat meat. And a majority of the time I was drinking two things: bone broth with butter. That was my go-to because I could get it down and keep it down, and it was high fat. Or the other thing I would drink was just avocado blended with water and a cucumber. I was just drinking those two smoothies all the time. But I wasn't feeling good. Like, the vegetables weren't doing great for me. So I later cut those almost completely out. But my hemoglobin skyrocketed. It was really, really weird. I'd been walking around with a hemoglobin in the 90s, no energy. I felt horrible. And during this time period, my hemoglobin went up to 125, which was absolutely crazy. And the radiologist said that next time I hemorrhage out, they're going to have surgery on my esophagus. They had never lined me up with a surgeon. So I said, oh, that's fabulous. You can line me up with a surgeon all you want, but I don't have one. So, because they essentially wrote me off, right? And so the radiologist actually goes, you don't have a surgeon? You never met a surgeon? So they aligned me with a surgeon, and the surgeon went in, and middle of February 15th, I had an esophagectomy. They actually removed 7 centimeters of my esophagus. They removed 15 lymph nodes. There was 4 lymph nodes left with cancer. They're all gone. So there was no more cancer left in my lymph nodes now. I'm left with a 1 millimeter tumor on my back. My liver, they say, is still covered in tumors, but they're all 1 to 3 millimeters. In my lung, I have a 1 millimeter tumor and a 3 millimeter tumor. In my pancreas, only a 1 millimeter tumor. The PET scan that the surgeon had done before the surgery, I was showing almost no cancer. I was showing no cancer. They couldn't find it on the PET scan. They could only see it on the CT scan. So the PET scan was showing no active glucose uptake from the sugar contrast. Everything was... So the surgeon said, let's do surgery. Let's give you a shot. And so if it wasn't for that surgeon, I think he made a big impact on me, because since that surgery, I've been eating now essentially carnivore based. I do have some vegetables at nighttime. I don't know why. My wife she's decided to do keto with me. I'm trying to be mostly carnivore, but she makes really good vegetable dishes, and we grow vegetables in the garden. And I will eat meat all day, eggs, bacon, and beef all day long. And then for supper, I'll primarily eat a ribeye, and then I'll have just a little dish of vegetables. But now the problem that I'm having is that my stomach is half the size of what it used to be. So it's very hard for me to consume a whole ribeye steak in one sitting. I gotta have multiple meals. And if the last little bit, I basically cut out all vegetables and I'm just eating ribeye steaks because that's and bacon and eggs because that's, from what I understand, the highest nutrition that I can get.
Let me, so a lot of things going on here, obviously. Let me ask just a couple questions. When back in whatever it was, the fall, you said, I'm just giving up because there's nothing I can do about glutamine and I'm just going to eat whatever I want. Did that have did you notice a big effect on your symptoms? Obviously you had the hemorrhage that occurred because of that. But I mean, did you just notice I felt worse immediately when I started eating whatever, just kind of garbagey?
Absolutely. And so at that time, I had just finished internal radiation, and then they had restarted my chemo sometime in October before I had given up. And I had the best mental clarity, focus, and energy I had had this whole journey so far. The aches and pains in my body had gone away. I was feeling the best ever. I hadn't realized it at the time. I'm saying that looking back, I didn't put it all together. I was just trying to eat and survive, and ribeye was going down, and I knew that everybody was talking on the different carnivore podcasts. I was listening to Seafried, and so that's what I did. It was the only thing I could really get down. It's weird that a ribeye was the one thing I could swallow without choking and throwing up all my food, but everything else was too sticky, or it wasn't working. And yeah, absolutely, that was the best I had felt. I don't know why I gave up. It was the worst decision.
So you've had, you were told at one point, there's nothing more we can do. Surgery's not an option. You're stage 4. We've maxed out chemo. We've maxed out radiation. And later they reversed it. Obviously the surgeon said, hey, look, let's do this esophagectomy. As far as, I mean, did they say that you are now in a good enough place to where you can have surgery? Obviously they must have seen that. So it must have been appreciable shrinking from either the chemo or the radiation or a combination of the diet. Did you ever get advice on diet, like while you were going through all this? Did the initial oncologist said, hey, this is maybe a diet you might want to pursue, or was that ever discussed at all?
Absolutely not. And when you go into chemo, the first thing they have is a fridge full of Ensure, and they tell you to take Ensure, keep on your weight. If you want a Big Mac, go eat a Big Mac. They say eat whatever you can get in you. And I asked them, I said, is there anything diet-wise or nutrition-wise I can do to help my situation? And they're like, no, diet does nothing. Like that was the ongoing thing that they would say. And they walk around there with cookies and chocolate, and they hand it out to cancer patients as you're sitting there getting chemo. And it blows my mind because Otto Warburg discovered in the 1920s that cancer is a metabolic disorder, that cancer doesn't live off of oxygen, that cancer is all about the uptake of glucose to the cell. And so if you're eating sugar and carbs, it's being converted to glucose. And when you listen to Professor Seafried speak, which I was extremely lucky to spend time with him, I really wish that video would do better. Unfortunately, I'm a small YouTube channel, but the guy's brilliant. Like he's got 30 years of research, over 150 published papers on cancer as a metabolic disorder. He's expanded on Otto Warburg's research. He says him and all of his colleagues, like there's thousands of papers out there that state that the higher level of glucose in your system, the faster the cancer grows. Another thing that I found absolutely fascinating, because I'm trying to exercise now because I am eating better and put on weight, but there's something called the Cori cycle, where if you generate lactic acid, the Cori cycle happens, and the lactic acid goes back through your liver, and it's processed back into glucose again, and that will then again grow cancer. So all this stuff I'm learning on my own, it's amazing. So now I am exercising, but now I'm watching my body, listening to my body. I'm going hiking in complicated hiking trails where there's complicated hills. Like I'm weak now compared to what I used to be. I used to be an athletic hockey player. So I'm exercising that way. I'm lifting weights for short periods of time. As soon as I feel that I've created lactic acid, I know what that feels like. I've been playing sports my whole life. I've worked out my whole life. I was pretty fit, I now know to stop. So it's not even just a diet. It's anything that's causing glucose spikes. It's the worst thing for you. And they're doing nothing at the cancer clinics in Canada. Absolutely nothing. And then another thing that boggles my mind is now that I have my own podcast going on YouTube here, I've got to meet a lot of different doctors and have a lot of conversations with them. And some of them actually have cancer themselves, and they've developed relationships. We're chatting. In the States, there are forward-thinking oncologists that are incorporating metabolic treatments now in the standard of care, and they're actually prescribing things like M-bendazole to the patients, like M-bendazole. Like, that's amazing. It's a dewormer for humans.
Mhm.
And so what it does is it interrupts the glucose and glutamine pathways to a worm. Like, cancer is not a parasite. That's absolutely not the case. But worms use glucose and glutamine pathways to get their energy. They don't use oxygen, just like a cancer cell. It ferments in glucose. And so in Canada, I don't even get the opportunity to take M-bendazole, like a human off-label drug. Doctors use off-label drugs all the time. I can't get access to things like ivermectin, which has shown a lot of promise in interrupting those pathways. There's a lot of off-label drugs that there are some oncologists in the States that I know for a fact are prescribing these drugs off-label to incorporate metabolic therapy along with a ketogenic diet. And the goal is to have a GKI of, for me, less than 2. I'm having a very hard time while eating getting there. But if I could have those off-label drugs, I believe it would create an astronomical difference in the remissions of my cancer.
Yeah, Thomas Seyfried often talks about something called a glucose ketone index as one of the targets for therapy, I suppose. Is that something you have sort of dabbled with? Are you tracking ketones and glucose, and what have you found with that if you've been doing that?
So again, I live in Canada. We can't get a keto mojo meter. So I had to go through people in the States that I've been able to build relationships with and send them the money over there. And then they bought me one and then they ship it to me. And then it's just this whole hassle. And then you got to buy strips. So I loaded up on strips, like 100 strips now. And I do have the keto mojo meter, but it took me over a month and a half to be able to find somebody that was willing to do it and get me the keto mojo meter. And so that's where I'm at now too with my diet. Is GKI is everything. So it's glucose ketone index, and Seyfried has the formula of dividing the two into each other. I actually did a bone scan. I don't know what happened, but my ketones were at 1.6 on Friday. My glucose was below 90. My GKI was between 2 and 3, which for me while eating is really good. If I'm fasting, I can get below 2.0, and that's really therapeutic for cancer. Because of my weight, when I fast, I have bone broth with butter, and I actually have an 18-day fast. I'm planning June 1st to June 18th. I'll fry animal fat and drink bone broth and butter. And so now I'm using the keto mojo meter, tracking GKI, and I'm trying to figure out which foods are spiking my glucose the most. I'm trying to do all this on my own. I'm taking fembendazole because I can buy that on Amazon. Now it's the dog version of M-bendazole because I can't get M-bendazole in Canada. So I'm taking some repurposed drugs or off-label drugs that I'm just doing on my own, becoming my own science experiment. And this is research from 1920s. Like, what are we doing? Like, it makes zero sense to me. Why is my doctor not incorporating metabolic therapy with my standard of care? Like, I just don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't see why trying to at least optimize nutrition would not make sense. And you know, if you look at the cancer literature, they're going to steer you towards a plant-based diet because that's what they've been studying, and they sort of have that sort of message that you know, eating a bunch of salad is a cure to everything, which it clearly may not be. Do you find so? How are you? I mean, you had your surgery, I guess you said in what was it, February you had your surgery? I can't remember. The
February
esophagectomy.
5th.
So what
Yeah,
is the
February
surveillance plan?
15th.
What is the surveillance plan right now? Do you get serial CT scans or MRIs or PET scans every 6 months, 3 months? What is the plan going forward?
So the plan going forward is there's no more chemo. They won't give me chemo. I'll have to go to second line chemo. The cancer has been stable. After speaking with Professor Seafried, I learned that my immune therapy, he asked me in the podcast what I was on, and I'm on Herceptin. And he had said that in 20% of cases it works, and in 80% cases, essentially, it doesn't work. And 20% of the 80% that don't work, it actually can become toxic to your body. And he explains it in the podcast that I did with him. But essentially 60% of the time, it does absolutely nothing. And my cancer has not changed. The esophagus changed, but when I had those mixed results back in August, almost a year ago, and I had started then in September, October, the carnivore diet, and then in January, the keto till basically now. And I'm primarily carnivore a majority of that time. The cancer hasn't changed. And if you were to ask an oncologist, they would say, oh, it's the Herceptin doing its job. But after speaking with Professor Seafried, I learned that's definitely not necessarily the case. He had said that in 20% of the time it works great and it will shrink cancer. But I've had no change in cancer. It's been completely inactive. It didn't show up on the PET scan, and I really think it's due to diet. I don't think it's due to Herceptin, because the odds aren't really in the favor of Herceptin. It's more in the favor of metabolic therapy, carnivore diet, ketogenic diet, I guess you could say, more so than the treatment itself.
Yeah, so I mean, it's hard to know for sure. Absolutely. I mean, obviously, there's a lot at stake here. If you're wrong, like I said, if I say, well, maybe it's not the Herceptin, and I'm just going to stop it, and then it progresses, then you've got an issue. I mean, if you look at the overall, as you probably know, the overall survival rate of stage 4 esophageal cancer is around 5%. 5-year survival rate, which is often considered the period of time. So you're a year and a half in, so 3.5 more years to go. Hopefully, you can keep that at bay. And I've seen a number of people with various types of cancer on carnivore diet, keto carnivore diets, who have kept these things in remission for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. Andrew Scarborough, guy with brain cancer, comes to mind. As I think he's now 10 years out from his diagnosis of a very aggressive, often fatal brain cancer. So, can't blame you for doing everything you can, because I mean, it's like I said, basically the medical system said, hey, we kind of maxed out and that's all we can do. And they don't really, honestly, they just don't know. They just don't know about this other stuff, and that's just not what they're trained in. So they don't know about it. And so they kind of think of it as maybe it's witchcraft or something to be ridiculed. But I mean, you're in a unique position that I don't know what I would do in the same position. I mean, it's hard to say what you do in that position, because everybody would say, but until you're faced with that, there's a lot of things you could say. It's like when Mike Tyson, he said something like, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And then it's like, okay, wait, things start to change a little bit, because you realize the amount of just actual acute terror and pain that go with this stuff. But what has your, so you said you've got some kids. I don't know how many kids you had. You got a small child or two or something like that, 2 of them. So obviously there's a huge motivation, outside of just the drive to stay alive and survive, but to do that for your kids. How did your wife sort of adapt? I mean, did she just say, hey, you just need to listen to doctors, do everything they say, or was she accepting of this sort of alternate route? How's that played out?
Well, as soon as January rolled around and I was hemorrhaging out, and I said, I think I need to do this, go back onto a carnivore diet or ketogenic diet or something. She jumped on board with me. She's been on ketogenic diet. She eats a lot of vegetables, but she's keto. I have very little vegetables. I stick to primarily meats. It's just she makes such good vegetables. I don't mind having it once in a while if it doesn't spike my GKI, but I feel like crap after it, But I can't convince her to go carnivore. But she just jumped right on board, was supportive. She takes me to all my appointments. She takes care of the kids. There's so many times I've been stuck in bed. She's taking care of 2 kids, a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. She's taking care of me. She injects me with all my needles. I'm having a problem post-surgery here. It's called reverse gastral or delayed gastral emptying. and I don't really know what it's all about, but I had to have my pylorus muscle stretched because nothing was getting through. So it was causing extreme abdominal pain and extreme vomiting. It was horrible. It's been going on for a few weeks, 2, 3 weeks now. So she's taking care of me. Well, all of a sudden I can't get a meal through and processed. She's coming in and she's helping me out with that. And she's got the kids. She's getting them to bed on time. And the first time that I had a real hard symptom from this, we had to call the ambulance. I was in so much pain. I was in a pain crisis, and I just had to get pain meds. Now that we figured out what it is, we know it's nothing urgent. It's just a matter of the food working through my system or me throwing it up to relieve the pressure. She actually uses hydromorphone and gives me injections because I can't take oral meds. She actually does all my needles. She tracks everything, and she could be in the middle of taking care of a 2-year-old. My 5-year-old's screaming, and I'm in a pain crisis, and she'll get me taken care of. I don't take hydromorph ever. I take 3 milligrams long acting now, daytime and nighttime. And in the last week, I've only had breakthrough twice. I had 2 pain crises, and she had to inject me with hydromorphone. I try not to take it because it spikes my glucose. But she's an absolute angel. She's extremely supportive. If I tell her I'm having ribeye steak tonight, and I'm gonna go out and barbecue it, she's like, she doesn't love ribeye steak. She prefers like a sausage or pork. We always go to the butcher and get everything from the butcher. She'll have pork chops or chicken. I'll barbecue hers, and I'll make my ribeye steak. That's really what I try to eat, primarily just fatty meat, just because I got to get weight on. I have to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess the question I have is, you have to put weight on, but yet you're planning on you said an 18-day fast or something like that. So how does that doesn't seem like to add up?
That's a fabulous question. So when I fast, what I do is I make homemade bone broth. I go to the butcher and I get beef bones, and I put them in the Instapot with salt and water, nothing else. And I cook it for 2 hours, and I get this beef bone broth. And then I put in a cup the bone broth and about 4 to 6 teaspoons of butter. And that's about 400 to 600 calories. And I put salt in there. And animal fats don't interrupt fast. They don't interrupt autophagy and mitophagy. And my GKI falls down to almost nothing. And then the other thing I do is I buy pure fat, like beef fat from the butcher, and fry it up like bacon. I cut it into like what looks like bacon. And my wife hates the smell, so I put it on the barbecue on like a cast iron plate, and I just fry it up, and I just eat pure animal fat. And so I got the butter, the bone broth, and the bacon fat, and my GKI falls to almost nothing. I can get it down to 1 or even lower sometimes, just because whether I burn the fat on my body or I burn the fat that I'm putting in my mouth, it's generating the ketones. My glucose is falling. It gets down into low 80s and even high 70s. My ketones spike hard to 2.5 sometimes, even. Like I've even pushed 3, but I haven't done an 18-day fast. I've only done this for 3-4 days. The reason why I'm going June 1st to June 18th is because my next scan is June 18th. I really want to have a heavy animal fat only fast and salt. And I really want to push for it. If you have any advice for me, Dr. Baker, please give it to me, because that's the best I think I can do to maintain my weight and fight this cancer. Please give me any feedback you have.
Well, I mean, certainly you're gonna, like you mentioned, you're gonna go very heavily into ketosis with that strategy for sure. I mean, I think that's pretty clear. From my perspective, preservation of lean mass is important. So at the very least, do some resistance training. I mean, I would do strength training while I'm doing this, just so the body gets a signal to keep the muscle around. So it doesn't sort of want to catabolize that, because there may be some tendency towards that. So that's at least one thing I would say beyond that. But again, you're in a very unique situation that most people will never thankfully find themselves in, hopefully. But what as far as irrespective of the cancer, which is a whole, I mean, there's so much that goes with that, the different symptoms. You said you had that kind of restriction in your pylorus, which the people don't know, that's the bottom part of your stomach that connects you to your small intestine. So the pylorus connects the stomach to the duodenum, which is the first part of the small intestine. But have you noticed any other sort of general benefits to just being in ketosis or being carnivore outside of dealing with these obviously cancer issues?
Yeah, when I was on the carnivore diet back September to October, I believe I was taking the chemotherapy better. And when I had stopped a couple more rounds, I was having allergic reactions after I stopped, and I couldn't take chemo anymore. So I feel like my chemo symptoms had dropped during that period. I had a couple rounds I had one round of chemo in that time period, actually only towards the end of October. And then I had I felt so much better. I seemed to have bounced back quicker. And another thing that happened was my weight stopped falling in January. When me and my wife went to keto and I was primarily a carnivore, um, my weight had been falling and falling. It just stopped falling. And that's when um, hemoglobin and all my blood work got stronger and stronger. And that's why the surgeon said, this is the best opportunity to do this. We wait for you to hemorrhage out again, you're not going to be in this good a shape. Like, that was the best shape I had been in a year and a half, looking at the history of everything I had been through and all my blood work and scans and all of that. So yeah, there's absolutely significant benefit from carnivore diet. Right now I'm the weakest I've ever been in my life, and I feel like I'm getting stronger all the time. If I was filling myself up on vegetables, I'm not getting a protein. I'm not going to build any sort of strength. And if the time comes that I start dropping weight again, fat's not going to stick around very long. So carbs aren't going to do me any good. If I at least have some lean muscle mass, I feel like I'll be able to like maintain myself a lot longer if something doesn't go right into the future, I think, by eating mostly carnivore. The biggest troubles that I'm having is my stomach is half the capacity. So I really got to take advantage of the highest nutrients dense food available. And I believe that's probably fatty beef, but I mean, you tell me, because I really don't know. That's just what I understand.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think, beef with adequate fat is going to be, certainly among the highest things you could probably consume. What outside of, nutrition, I mean, there's a question about, I know Thomas Seyfried has talked about press pulse therapy with hyperbaric oxygen. Is that something you have access to, tried to do, want to do, thought about? And then what other things are you doing outside of just nutrition, sleep, you mentioned exercise. What are all the things that you're incorporating?
So one of the biggest benefits I had, one of the side effects of my chemo was neuropathy. I guess you could call this nutrition, but not really. And so I was listening to a Joe Rogan podcast about 3 weeks ago. There was a guy on there named Paul Stamets. I don't know if you've heard of him before. He's not a carnivore guy. He owns the biggest library of mushrooms in the world. Everything from health and therapeutic mushrooms to deadly poisonous mushrooms to psychedelic mushrooms. And my neuropathy from my chemo, because I had pushed it so far, was so bad that my hands were in constant pain. I couldn't use them. I was dropping everything. And he was doing this one's totally off. This is crazy, but if anybody's watching this and has chemotherapy, this could literally save you. So he did a test where if you took a microdose of psychedelic mushroom psilocybin, which in Canada you can buy at storefronts now, like you can get legal treatment here with it. You can buy it at a storefront. It's not descheduled, but it's kind of like marijuana before it was decriminalized. I'm not promoting drugs or anything, but you can just buy these microdosing capsules. You don't feel anything. You don't get high. It's just a subpar dose that you take, and you take it with lion's mane and niacin. I've decided not to take the niacin because it spikes glucose. It's a vitamin B or something. I'm not exactly sure. I chose not to take it. And so I microdose like 1 day on, 2 days off. And that was one thing that immediately the neuropathy in my hands, I would take it the first day and I thought I felt better. Like I could actually use my hands. They weren't in excruciating pain. I felt great. Day 2, you don't take it. And day 3, I don't take it. And then day 4, I take it again. So it's like 1 day on, 2 days off. So the first day I thought, oh, this is just like the microdose just masking the pain. But day 2 and 3, my hands felt better. like they didn't go back into this crazy amount of pain. And then every time I do it, 1 day on, 2 days off, my hands and feet actually get better. So that's one thing that I'm doing that's made an astronomical difference. I know it's mushrooms, it's not exactly carnivore, but it was working. And honestly, I was so desperate. My hands and feet were just completely fried. I'd do anything to get out of that pain. So that's had a big difference. There's somebody I know that has a hyperbaric oxygen chamber. So I've reached out to him, and he's going to allow me to use that. And did I get that right? The one that scuba divers use, like where LeBron James uses it, pumps oxygen in you.
I'm not sure what LeBron James, but yeah, I mean, they're hyperbaric oxygen. This means oxygen at a higher pressure,
Yeah.
bariatric pressure, right? So yeah, for sure. I mean, that's something that has been used for things like wound healing. I used to send my patients with chronic wounds for hyperbaric therapy, and I mean, so they exist and they're utilized, and there's some good results on some of that stuff. So I don't see a real downside to doing it for sure. I mean, I can't see anything but potential upside. Maybe it doesn't do anything, but it probably is not going to hurt, at least in my estimation. How as far as you said you went back on carnivore after you had the bleed, and you've had the esophagectomy now, and you've had further radiation, further chemotherapy. Do you feel like which direction are you going? You feel like you're getting healthier, or do you feel like you're declining? I mean, it sounds like maybe things are getting better for you.
I think things are getting better for me. This surgery was major surgery, and esophagectomy is no joke. Cutting out 7 centimeters of your esophagus, cutting out half your stomach, and replumbing everything back together is no joke. I have a hard time turning and twisting, and so I've been golfing with my buddies and stuff. I went out with 4 of them the other day, and I beat 2 of them, so that felt pretty good. It's always good to beat your buddies. So I mean, I'm doing stuff like that. I'm working out a little bit. I'm doing a lot of hiking when inclines. I feel like I'm getting stronger every day. I'm honestly extremely excited to do this fast, this high animal fat only fast, June 1st to June 18th. I really think that's going to have an astronomical impact on things. Like I can't even tell you how much I'm looking forward to it. It might sound crazy, but I got this thing in my head that tells me like there's all kinds of people out there that talk about prolonged fasting and cancer. Another thing that happens with mild exercise while prolonged fasting is if you do mild exercise while prolonged fasting, and your recommendation was resistance training, which is genius, you can actually drop glutamine. The glutamine uptake goes down according to Professor Seyfried. So if I get in that fasting state and I do mild exercise, I not only will target glucose, but glutamine with bembendazole, and there's things like Advil and Tylenol and some other drugs that I'm going to take that are over the counter that some people, I don't know whether it's true or not, but have been prescribed in the States from forward-thinking oncologists to block those pathways. I don't know how Tylenol and Advil will do it, but it's not going to hurt to take it. It's at least going to reduce inflammation. So I don't know. I'm really looking forward to that. Another thing I'm doing is Wim Hof breathing. I do a lot of that, like meditation, where you get a lot of oxygen into your blood and then you hold your breath and you do like deep meditation. I feel like Wim Hof breathing is having a huge impact on my overall health and the diet.
How do you said at one point back in the fall, you just said, I'm just going to give up. This is, whatever. What has changed your mindset about that? Or how do you stay positive in what is, clearly a very challenging situation? I mean, what is keeping you, I guess, positive and that type? Is this the will to stay alive, or what? Because there's a lot of people who would be very depressed and give up in this situation. I mean, clearly that goes on.
Well, guys like you, guys like Professor Seyfried, when I had given up, like you have a high level knowledge of health. Like you're an orthopedic surgeon. You understand things I don't understand. You probably understand even things at a cellular level. And you can listen to a guy like Professor Seyfried and understand exactly what he's saying. It makes sense to you. It doesn't make any sense to me. I come from finance. Like I could could write a financial plan for you that would blow your mind, but I couldn't tell you the first thing about the human body. And honestly, knowledge, I think, is the first thing. You know, if you're diagnosed with an illness or an ailment, the first thing you better do is get friggin' educated. I wish I would have known that at the start of this. Like, it takes time if you're not from a healthcare background. So I think knowledge is a big deal. I think that goes a long ways. The will to live. I got kids. I got a wife. Like, I love my life. I don't want to leave this world. That provides a lot of drive. And then when I did that psychedelic experience back in October with the shrink and the doctor legally through Health Canada, that really changed my mindset. It really got me refocused. It relieved me of all the stress. It made me, honestly, 80% of the fear of my own death was gone. 80% of the fear of my own death, it went away. And that was really a big relief because my glucose dropped. Like, Professor Seafried, when I interviewed him, he talked about, I asked him about stress and all these other things, and he said, yes, like, stress drives glucose, it grows your cancer. And so things like that, it allowed me to refocus and regroup. And come January, when I was hemorrhaging out, that was frightening. Like, I got a picture, I think I sent it over to you guys, I don't know, but it's me holding a bag full of blood. Like, that was coming out of my mouth. Like, it was frightening. And I needed to do something. Like, what am I supposed to do? I'm 36 years old. Like, just let it roll over and die? So I think knowledge is, again, that was the first thing I said to you. Knowledge, like, it was a huge learning curve, and I did give up, but I got back to listening to you, guys like you, Anthony Shafee, Dr. Anthony Shafee, Carrie from Homestead How, like, all the different podcasters speaking out about the benefits of carnivore diet, Professor Seafried. And I went online, I started reading published research. Thank God for AI, because it can summarize a lot of that stuff for you. And I learned how to read scientific papers that have been published. I didn't know how to do that. I had to figure it out. So I had to put in the work. It was a huge learning curve, but once you figure it out, you can really, and you get efficient at it, you can go through research, you can learn more, and you can grow. And I think that makes a big difference. And when you get that knowledge base, the anxiety of cancer and these illnesses, whatever they may be, it actually goes down. And then you can actually come up with a game plan to help treat yourself along with the standard of care. And you do get a lot more positive and optimistic, I think, when that happens.
What do you, so, assuming you beat this, which is, I mean, hopefully, it's hard to say for sure. I mean, obviously you're in the right direction right now. What is the plan? I mean, what do you have, like, I mean, because I assume you're maybe not working right now. I don't know what, because of the day-to-day, this routine, but do you have a plan to go back to work? What is your thought, and how does that, in your mind, how do you see the future?
Well, the first thing with cancer is you really don't think too far ahead. I'd love to go back to work. I got clients in my financial services practice that I answer my phone, I watch the markets, I make sure everything's in good order. I got a couple guys that are in the business that help me with it. They get paperwork done, they keep everything in order, they keep my compliance in order. I'm not doing hardly anything. I do what I need to do. When they need me to talk to a client or do whatever, I step up and do it. But no, I'm not working. I'd love to go back to work. I would love to just have my life back. Like, if you're sitting there healthy right at this moment, like, enjoy every friggin' moment you have, because, like, you can just wake up tomorrow and it can be taken from you. Like, I miss working so much and being with my clients and my friends and just being able to go out for normal dinners and just having energy, not feeling sick. Like, I've thrown up probably 90% of my meals over the last year and a half. Like, it's horrible. Like, I'm frightened of food most of this time. Now that I've had my esophagectomy, now I'm having this new issue. It's just like, food gives me extreme pain now. It's like, what is going on? Like, just enjoy your life. And so what's my plan? I can't look that far forward. I can only do what I can do here and now. Like, I got to do everything I can to try to beat this. They say stage 4 cancer, you can't beat it. I don't know what you know about that, but that doesn't make sense to me. But they keep telling me there is no beating stage 4 cancer. Well, that's so hopeless. Like, these doctors need to they need to figure something out, because that's not right. There's got to be a way to beat it.
Well, you know, I guess the cynic in me says there's not a lot of money in curing cancer. I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things where it's a challenging situation because um, it's interesting. Most of the drugs being developed these days are for lifestyle issues, because they get a recurring revenue stream. So the funding that goes towards curing cancer is, I think the motivation is lower because, this is something you might not need, unless they find a drug you have to take the rest of your life, then that might be a good lucrative model for them. So, I mean, it's unfortunate that there's a business first side of things that are developed, and then maybe later, well, I don't know. We'll see. What has been, since you said you're vomiting most of your meals, um, is that depending upon what you eat, or you just don't know? Sometimes steaks come up, sometimes they don't. What's been driving that?
All over the map. Yeah, I haven't been since the surgery. Now it's this new problem of pain, but pre-surgery, yeah, it was at random. You would have a ribeye steak one night and you'd crush the whole thing and everything was fine. The next night you'd eat it and the second bite you're just vomiting.
Mm-hmm.
And then yeah, it was like when I used to drink when I was in college. I said I'm just gonna puke and rally, and because I was losing so much weight, I would literally puke and then go back to eating my steak. Like, you get sick of.
Let me go back to the diagnosis of esophageal cancer. Because sometimes it's in the setting of chronic reflux or something like that. Is that something that you had ever experienced prior to? Like, a lot of people, they'll have something called Barrett's esophagus where they have chronic. Yeah, but any signs of stuff beforehand?
They said that I had a hiatal hernia that I didn't know was there. Um, Hiatal hernia? Yeah, hiatal hernia right up where my stomach and my esophagus meet. That was the only thing they said on a scope.
Yeah, that may predispose you to sort of reflux. That's pretty common in that situation. Are you documenting any of this stuff on say social media and stuff like that?
Yeah, I'm on YouTube, so I'm still trying to come up with a channel name, but I got multiple videos on there. Jason Watson right now is my channel name. But yeah, I've interviewed some people. I interviewed Professor Seafried on there. I really need help getting that video out there because it was such a good interview. That everybody needs to get out and everybody needs to see this guy speak because everybody knows somebody with cancer. It can help so many people. And yeah, I really could use a lot of help on that because YouTube's very hard on new channels to get the word out.
Yeah, so just repeat the name. You're calling it right now Jason Watson, right? Watson, Jason, Jason, basically.
Yep, that's the name right now.
So you guys go check that one out. And yeah, and Thomas Seafried is very passionate about this whole topic, and I've spoken to him on a number of occasions. So he's actually quite good to listen to. So, well, I think at this point, let's just kind of stop here. Let's wish you good luck on that scan on the 18th. Are you going to post your results on the 18th or shortly after when you get them?
Yeah, I'm gonna post probably beginning, middle, and end of the fast, and I'm gonna post my scan results. Hopefully it's positive. So yeah, I'm planning on doing all that, assuming my health's okay and I can get on and upload all that information. That's the plan. I did have one question for you, if you have a quick second, from one of my people that follow me on YouTube. They asked me to ask you something, if that's okay.
Sure.
HP level or pH level when you're on carnivore keto diet, is there any concern there? Or is it like if somebody's having problems, I don't even know what it is, but a pH level, is there anything they can do to help regulate
pH
that?
is basically the sort of the relative acidity or basicness of your various tissues. We can have, a lot of time people talk about like blood pH, which is something we can assess fairly easy. It's really hard to alter that. In interstitial fluid doesn't really do much with that. You can, a meat-based diet may lower your urine acidity, which I think there is some belief that may lead to kidney stones. But again, that's based in standard populations, and there's a lot of things that go into that. So I don't know there's anything realistic on that. I think it's mostly just conjecture. But the acid level of as long as you have functioning lungs and functioning kidneys, it's really hard to impact that much with diet. I mean, it's very minimal. I mean, the best you can do is acidify your urine a little bit, which again is questionable if it has any relevance at all. All right. Well, I'm going to shut this one down. Jason, it's been a pleasure. Good luck to you. This is inspirational, and I wish you the best. Thank you.
Thank you.